Hey, my name is Marco Gregorio, and today I'll be covering one of America's biggest unsolved murder cases.
Joe Biden!
The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac is a killer whose identity remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history.
The thing is, the Zodiac went beyond the typical serial killer archetype.
The Zodiac engaged with law enforcement and the media with cryptic letters and ciphers that are unsolved even today.
He would begin his messages with an unmistakable declaration.
Who am I speaking with?
This is the Zodiac speaking.
These chilling communications not only taunted the police, but created a sense of public unease and intimidation. To this day, the Zodiac Killer's identity has not been confirmed, but many believe it to be Arthur Leigh Allen, who was a prime suspect at the time and is still a prime suspect to this day.
The ominous saga of the Zodiac Killer is believed to have begun with the tragic murder of Cherry Joe Bates, marking the commencement of a series of heinous crimes that would terrorize Northern California.
Wait, before you continue, the following videos that are about to be presented are a realistic recreation of the death of the victims previously mentioned. These deaths are acted out in a movie named The Zodiac, but you have been warned. It is extremely gory and not for sensitive stomachs. Proceed with caution. The Zodiac would go on to have a total of 6 kills. His repertoire including the shooting of a teenage couple.
Man, you really creeped us out.
An assault on another couple, and the ruthless killing of a taxi driver.
Anyway, whether they printed it or not.
Yeah, interesting point. So, what do you think you'll do next?
The killer typically targeted young couples in secluded areas, and in some cases, he approached them while wearing a black executioner's hood to hide his identity. The mask had his iconic symbol, which resembled the crosshairs of a gun sight. The Zodiac Killer's crimes unfolded in different locations across in the San Francisco Bay Area in Northern California. This included Lake Herman Road in Benicia, Blue Rock Springs in Vallejo, and Lake Berissa. This geographical spread of the crimes contributed to the elusive nature of the Zodiac Killer, who managed to operate in different areas. This made it even harder for investigators to discover his true identity, not being able to find a correlation between all these areas. Seeing as we have no confirmed killer up until now, I'll be expanding on who many, including me, believed not only committed the crime, but should have done the time. Alright, but on a more serious note, many believed that it was Arthur Leigh Allen. As said before, he was a prime suspect who was never apprehended. This is due to what police called insufficient evidence. However, I believe that is far from the truth. Let us go all the way back to Arthur's childhood. Arthur Leigh Allen was born in 1933 in Honolulu, Hawaii. He, however, grew up in Vallejo, California, near the site of many of the Zodiac's future killings. Now, not much is known about his childhood, but according to various accounts, Arthur's mother, Bernice Allen, was described as a woman who constantly pampered and spoiled him, doing his cooking, washing his clothes, cleaning up after him, and providing him with tons and tons of money. Even with all this, Arthur's wife explained to police that Arthur hated his mother and had often expressed this hatred in her presence. Most of all, he felt inferior around his father, Ethan Allen, who was a highly successful military man. Their relationship was extremely strained, as while Arthur's dad upheld the law, Arthur himself racked up a criminal record which began at a young age. He was involved in various offenses, such as burglary and disturbing the peace. This didn't make sense, as Arthur was given everything he wanted as a child. It seems he did it for fun. This was the beginning of what many consider the Zodiac Killer's childhood. Unfortunately, as Arthur got older, things did not get better. In 1954, Arthur was convicted of breaking and entering and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. This marked the beginning of a pattern of criminal behavior even in his adulthood. Arthur would then go on to join the US Navy, but then be dishonorably discharged in 1958. The exact reason for this discharge remains undisclosed. Anyhow, the most notable and disgusting thing he did was lose his job as an elementary school teacher in 1968 due to allegations of molesting school children. The following that will be presented is a video from the movie The Zodiac that recreates the interrogation that went down between Arthur and the police. He would be questioned on lots of circumstantial evidence, but one question in particular truly got to him.
That is horrible. That's a horrible thing to say.
So you aren't angry about being fired from Valley Springs for touching your students?
I'm not the Zodiac. And if I was, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
This, of course, isolated Arthur, making him lonely. Somehow, he would later get married, only to face charges of domestic violence during his marriage. Reports, of course, suggested that he had troubled relationships with women because he felt somehow superior to them. These allegations added to the perception of him as an unstable individual, further cementing the case of him being the Zodiac Killer. With the profound knowledge and information I have gathered to make this documentary, I will now be simulating a live court case simulation to prove what the police couldn't. Arthur Leigh Allen, without a doubt, is the Zodiac Killer and should have been left to rot in a jail cell for the crimes he's committed. I will be the one to prove this. Without further ado, let's get right into it.
Hello everyone. Thank you. Please be seated. Today, we are in court to review the case of Arthur Allen v. State, with the prosecution claiming him to be the infamous Zodiac Killer while the defense refutes this. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone to please be silent and respectful, not for the sake of the defendant, but in regards to the courtroom. We will now entertain speeches from both parties, the prosecution and the defense. We will start with the prosecution, seeing as they have the burden of proof. Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution has come here today to put a man who claims himself to be the Zodiac Killer into bars and never see the light of day again. There is too much evidence against the plaintiff. Too many coincidences, and it's time to realize that Arthur Leigh Allen is guilty. To take a life is the worst crime one can commit, and Arthur, or more specifically the Zodiac, took 6 of them. Every murder was premeditated, even sending letters to not only taunt the police, but instill fear in the public. Similarly, a precedent case that has the touch of the Zodiac is the BTK killer, who received 10 life sentences, and so we seek the same charges. I thank you for your time, Your Honor. Thank you. Please be seated. Can the defense please rise and proceed with their opening speech? Yes, Your Honor. The defense is here to prove that without a doubt, Arthur Leigh Allen is innocent. There are too many circumstances, too many suspects to pick, and the evidence is too loose. I believe that the people have grown tired of not being able to identify the gruesome Zodiac killer. And so what have they done? They have picked at random, as the police cannot live with their own failure. Thank you. Please be seated. Seeing as both parties have now concluded their opening speeches, court is now in session. The prosecution may proceed by calling upon a witness for cross-examination. Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution would like to call upon the stand Mike Magayu, one of only 2 survivors that escaped the wrath of the Zodiac killer. Mike was fortunately able to catch a glimpse of the Zodiac before he was shot 4 different times, but somehow lived. He will be the one to identify Arthur as the killer. Mr. Magayu, please take the stand. Here I am. Thank you for accepting to be a witness and coming all this way. I simply have one question, and one question only. Mr. Magayu, from what your eyes can perceive, is Arthur the man who shot you? Or to be more clear, is he the Zodiac? Yeah, that's him. That's the man who shot me. No remorse, not even knowing me. That must have been so traumatizing. I'm sorry you had to go through this. Thank you. No, Mr. Magayu. Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions. Seeing as the witness who was a victim of the Zodiac was able to identify Arthur as the killer, there's not much else to go off of. I rest my case. Your Honor, objection! That is completely out of order and disrespectful to the court. Objection sustained. Prosecutor, please act with more respect towards the court and the defendant. Apologies, Your Honor. Seeing as the prosecution has no further questions, would the defense like to cross-examine the witness? Yes, Your Honor. Please proceed. Mr. Magayu, how can you be so sure Arthur was the killer? Surely it would be hard to remember the person you were shot by to the point of unconsciousness. No, I'm confident it is him. And are you aware that Arthur stated that he was at home at the time? Objection! Speculation. Your Honor, Arthur does not have any witnesses or people who can vouch for that. Being at home all day is not a valid alibi. Sustained. Please provide only hard facts in the courtroom, defense. That is the case. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Seeing as there are no more questions, Mr. Magayu, you may be seated. Thank you for your time. Does the prosecution have any other witnesses they would like to cross-examine? No, Your Honor. Instead, we would like to move on and present evidence. Exhibit 213. More specifically, a watch Arthur was gifted by his mother 2 years before the Zodiac killings began. What is the relevance of this object to be taken into court as evidence? As you and many others may know, Your Honor, the Zodiac's killer symbol is a sort of circle with a plus sign on it, like the crosshairs of a gun. And of course, the killer's famous name is the Zodiac. Funny enough, this watch, right here, was taken from Arthur to be used as evidence. Not only does this watch have the same symbol that the Zodiac used, but it also has the word Zodiac imprinted on it. Please keep in mind, Your Honor, that Arthur was in possession of this watch before the killings, and it is too much of a coincidence to simply ignore. Interesting. Let the court know that this supposed Zodiac watch will be taken into evidence and is indeed relevant to the case. Thank you, prosecutor, for your evidence. Please be seated. Defense, would you like to make a statement to refute the taking of this watch into evidence? Yes, Your Honor. I firmly believe that what the prosecution is doing is the definition of nitpicking. This watch is not relevant as Zodiac brand watches during Arthur's time were very popular, especially among US Navy. There is no direct link between the watch and the killer. It is just coincidence. I see your point. It will be taken into consideration. Please be seated. Prosecution. What would you like to do next? Your Honor, I would like to call the witness, Don Cheney, to the stand. Mr. Cheney, please take the stand. Stop. Yo, Mr. Prosecutor. Stop. Hello, Mr. Cheney. I am aware that you and Arthur used to be friends until your falling out in 1969, where he supposedly tried to molest you. Is that true? Stop. Yeah, man. Nothing but the truth. Good. That leads me to my second and last question. Is it true that Arthur would talk about hunting and killing people as if they were animals, as it seemed more fun? Yeah, Mr. Prosecutor, all facts. He compared what he wanted to do to a book called The Most Dangerous Game, where humans were hunted down like lambs to the slaughter. Stop. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. You have been a big help. So, anytime, yo. Prosecution. Defense, would you like to cross-examine the witness? Yes, Your Honor. Please proceed. Mr. Cheney, is it not true that you have lied about Arthur in the past to get him into trouble? Such as claiming he had a gun, though he didn't? How can you say your word is true? My word is truer than truth, brother. He did it. Sure, might have lied before, but that was a long time ago. Yes, but you had a falling out with him, no? Maybe this is your form of revenge? Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. Sustained. That is all then. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Please be seated. Seeing as time for court has elapsed, we will now entertain closing remarks and any additional information before a verdict is made. Prosecution, begin. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Yes, lots of the evidence provided is circumstance, but there are too many circumstances to call it coincidence. Let us not forget the extensive criminal record Arthur has racked up over the years. Breaking and entering, disturbing the peace, sexual assault, and even molesting school children. It is not surprising that a person with multiple felonies will have killed a person. People, 2 of the Zodiac's victims were shot just 4 minutes away from his house. How many coincidences will there be before he's finally caught? The killer is right in front of us. This is where justice will prevail. Mr. and Mrs. of the jury, there is no physical evidence that proves Arthur to be the Zodiac. Too many coincidences is not a relevant point to be made in the court of law. A piece of information to disclose is that fingerprints and DNA that were collected from the Zodiac do not match with those of Arthur's. We must think straight and not put an innocent man into bars. Thank you. Seeing as both speeches have been made, I will now decide the verdict on the case of Arthur v. State. In the case of Arthur Leigh Allen, the court agrees that he is guilty in the charges of 6 murders and being the Zodiac killer. He will receive 10 life sentences as a precedent case before received the same punishment. Court adjourned.